contains a copy of a copy of a copy of a copy, copy.
Deja vu.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Deja Reviewed podcast, where we talk about the original versions of TV shows that were later rebooted. This is season 1, which we're calling In the Zone, discussing The Twilight Zone. I'm Michael.
And I'm Mark.
And today we're talking about season 1, episode 22. And a lot of people should be thinking about this one. This is The Monsters Are Due on Maple Street. And The Monsters Are Due on Maple Street originally aired on March 4th, 1960. It was directed by Ron Winston as Ronald Winston, written by Rod Serling, starring Rod Serling, Claude Akins, and Barry Atwater.
There is a fifth dimension.
Both shadow and substance.
Suddenly up ahead.
You're moving and beyond lands another dimension.
Next stop, the Twilight Zone.
Okay, here's Serling's opening voiceover from The Monsters Are Due on Maple Street. Maple Street, USA. Late summer. A tree-lined little world of front porch gliders, barbecues, the laughter of children, and the bell of an ice cream vendor. At the sound of the roar and the flash of light, it will be precisely 6:43 p.m. on Maple Street. This is Maple Street on a late Saturday afternoon. Maple Street, in the last calm and reflective moment before the monsters came.
And from IMDb, the description is, on a peaceful suburban street, strange occurrences and mysterious people stoke the residents' paranoia to a disastrous intensity.
Not only is that not a good summary, that doesn't even describe what happens in the episode.
No, and it's also not accurate what it does describe. I don't remember any mysterious people stoking the residents' paranoia. So
okay,
let's
so
just
if you were debating whether to see this episode based on the IMDb summary, it is completely inaccurate. We should go in and fix that.
We should.
We won't, but we should.
So Ron or Ronald Winston, the director, did 3 Twilight Zone episodes, but this is the first one that we've seen. There's another one that's coming up in just a few episodes, I believe, but we haven't seen Ron Winston or Ronald Winston direct anything before. What
about Ronnie Winston?
I didn't do my research on that one. I didn't. Ronnie Marlborough actually did one. That's a bad joke. But
yeah, I don't even know if you're making that up or not. Winston Marlborough, got it.
Yes. There's a lot of smoking, and none in The Monsters Are Due on Maple Street, but a lot of smoking in The Twilight Zone.
Yeah, although less so in the last couple episodes.
Agreed.
We had, I think even we commented in The Fever when they were in a casino where even today everyone is smoking, and somehow there wasn't a lot. So maybe they dialed some of that back.
So let's do a little bit of correction from the IMDb description of this. So this is a very well-known Twilight Zone episode, and I assume we're going to talk about this quite a bit. This is one of the ones that is very apt right now with what's going on with the shelter-at-home orders that are happening all across the states. Really, what happens in this episode? What ends up being a spaceship lands on the top of a hill outside of this town overlooking Maple Street, and the electricity or all the power starts going in and out of their devices. And so, of course, they all get paranoid because we had this very strange kid drop in and just be like, well, I read a comic book that says that it's people coming in and taking over, and that they have some advanced people that are already down here that look like us. And essentially what the people thought was a meteor landing was this actual spaceship. And so everyone turns on each other, and paranoia runs rampant, let's say. It's very Invasion of the Body Snatchers. And then at the end, we find out that it actually was aliens, that they realized all they had to do was turn off the lights for a little while, and we would start killing each other. Is that a better description? Let's put that on IMDb.
I don't think that could be your IMDb summary. That was like longer than the script of the episode.
Well,
I think the summary would be there's a power outage, and people find none of their things are working, and in mass hysteria start turning on each other.
Okay. Well, you didn't even mention aliens, so I think my summary was slightly
better. Well, the aliens
better.
didn't show up till which your description was correct of what happened, but that was kind of the one of the Twilight Zone twists at the end, that we don't actually find out it was aliens until the ending. And that was actually one of the, I'm sure we'll talk about, one of the things to me interesting structurally was you kind of knew where the general plot was going very early on, that they were all going to turn on each other and be paranoid and suspicious. It was not clear until the very end what the sort of resolution of the episode or conclusion or closure would be, because there were a whole bunch of different ways, and I was speculating as the episode went on how the episode itself could wrap up, because you knew they were all going to turn on each other, but would it turn out that there were in fact aliens? Would it turn out that there were monsters among them, but they were killing the wrong people? Would it turn out that it really was just a power outage and these people went apeshit over it for no reason? So that part I thought was interesting, and it does turn out to be aliens in, I think, Mike, correct me if I'm wrong. I feel like this may be the first episode we've seen here in episode 22 that actually has legitimate like aliens on Earth. And I know we've seen other things with like non-terrestrial people, Third from the Sun was a good one where we thought the whole time they were Earthlings, and it turned out we were watching an alien civilization. But the first one where we actually have aliens land on Earth, is that correct?
I think so. Yeah, I think so. I mean, we saw Satan. We saw an angel. We saw, we saw Mr. Death. Yeah, I think this is, if I recall correctly.
Yeah, we've seen all sorts of interesting things, which is good.
Maybe the peddler and Mr. Denton might have been an alien, but I think he was more some spiritual guy.
Mr. Fate or something.
Yeah, Fate. Yeah, that's right, yeah. Mr. Fate.
Yeah, so we've seen a lot of unusual things because it's the Twilight Zone. But I just thought that was, we've talked over the course of this season about what people's perception of the Twilight Zone is and in the sort of cultural mindset versus what it actually is. And that's something if you would have asked me before we started this, how far in would it be before we saw some aliens? I mean, I think I would have guessed like episode 2.
That's a good call.
And we made it most of the way through the season.
I think you're right.
Before we get more into this, Mike, I wanted to share a thought that I was having kind of about, this is going to be a little meta here for our audiences, but about the podcast itself.
Mark, let me just interject really quickly and say this after show podcast about a 60-year-old television show is already super meta.
So here's my Deja reviewed, which I still like as a name. We're never going to do that podcast, but I usually try to go back and listen to our episodes at some point, just to hear how they sounded. And I also have a terrible memory, so if I wait more than a week, I forget what we talked about, and it comes as news. I'm like, oh, that was an interesting idea we had there.
So you're the one.
So I am our listener. Yes, I was listening to the last episode we did, Mirror Image, and that one, if you remember, we spent a good chunk of the episode talking about the gender roles in it, because that was the episode after Serling had kind of come on screen and talked about, people say I don't write well for women, and watch our next episode and I'll show you, essentially was the takeaway from it. And we discussed all that last time. But, what struck me was I actually really liked that episode and how much it was about things that remain relevant today, and we're kind of, analyzing the zeitgeist and the culture of the time, as opposed to just drilling down on so many of the details of the episodes, which are interesting to do. And I, as a film person, like hearing that, but I was struck by, that was an episode where I felt like we talked so much about the sort of bigger picture sparked by the episode, as opposed to the episode itself. And this one is another one that I think there's definitely interesting things to talk about with the episode itself, but I think the bigger questions it raises are actually much more interesting. And as you already alluded to, very particularly relevant during the pandemic that's going on in the quarantine. But I think a lot of it would be relevant even if we weren't in this right now.
I agree. I wholeheartedly agree. And frankly, there was a lot of hype built up for this episode in the back of my mind, because I've been reading I didn't read any of the articles actually about how this related to the pandemic, because I wanted to go in fresh.
Yeah, same
here.
But
this is an episode that is related, that is in the past week or couple of weeks, which is Google just mining the fact that I'm interested in Twilight Zone, but have had a bunch of directed articles at me pointing toward this episode being a very topical episode right now. And I watched it 3 times. And the first time I watched it, I was like, okay, I don't really see how this is sort of one of the, because this is one of the legendary Twilight Zone episodes, along with like the Gremlin on the plane with Shatner. I think Time Enough at Last. This is one of the very well known to my knowledge Twilight Zone episodes. And the first time I watched it, I was like, okay, that was interesting. And the second time I watched it, I'm like, I think I can sort of see it. And then the third time I watched it, I really, really liked it. So, not to spoil toward the end of this, but I agree with you. I don't think there's a whole lot to say. Well, there's plenty to say about the episode too, but the more interesting thing I think is to be about how this episode is relevant, which is the whole point of this podcast, right?
Yeah. And again, I'm not saying let's not talk about the episode at all, but it just struck me how much in Mirror Image we were focusing on the sort of bigger picture, and that was really interesting. And so that was something I came in, like you, knowing some hype going into this. I would agree Google is, mining our data and, so it's showing us these things, but also like, look, there's a reason that there have been multiple articles that showed up about, here's how this episode of the Twilight Zone is relevant right now. So yes, it's noting that I would be interested in things about the Twilight Zone based on, viewing and our podcast and other things, but it's not like that's shown up for every other episode. Like, hey, here's 10 stories being written about Elegy right now,
Exactly.
So I think the fact that we're being made aware of those articles speaks to the data mining, but people are writing about it because it is relevant. And I keep the thing that I came back to, and I know we're going to read the end voiceover later, but this is one of the more soapboxy voiceover endings we have seen. Thing. And I don't mean that critically, because I'm actually 100% on board with what Serling says in it, but it's very much like, disconnects from the episode entirely and like, let me tell you about humanity here for a while.
It's funny you say that, because I put that this is one of my favorite, if not my favorite closing narrations, but almost definitely also the most preachy closing narration for sure. Before we get to that, I really loved
that's like the end of our
episode. Goodbye. I really liked the opening narration quite a bit too, and I think Before the Monsters Came is one of his best teasers for an episode I think that Serling's ever written. It really just left like, oh boy, here comes trouble. It was neat, and I think what you're alluding to, Mark. The monsters, this is every zombie movie ever. The real monsters are man. And of course, that was the moral of this one, that he really hits over the head in the closing narration. But Before the Monsters Came was super neat, because there were aliens, and they were frankly monsters because they were there to colonize the earth. They were essentially causing chaos on Maple Street because they were going to just go from town to town, from street to street, and cause this chaos, making man attack themselves to presumably take over the planet. So Before the Monsters Came was a fantastic closing line, I thought, for that opening narration.
Agreed. I thought that was really good. And just to kind of put this in a category the same way we've done with some of the other episodes, we've talked about most of them being about a protagonist, and they sort of introduce a character. And a couple of them have focused on a vehicle or a venue. So we had Judgment Night, where it talked about the ship. We had Last Flight, where it talked about...
I shot an arrow, maybe.
I shot an arrow, and also... and When the Sky Was Open, didn't that also talk about an experimental aircraft?
I think you're right.
Yes, yeah. So we've kind of had several in these. The one to me that was closest to this, because it's talking just about Maple Street, not about any of the particular characters on it. It's like this sort of venue, which I guess you could talk about similarly maybe to Judgment Night, in that it's the ship on which these things take place. True. But actually the one that I thought it resonated with was Purple Testament, where the focus was a platoon. And really what this is getting at, and the protagonist here is the whole population of this block on Maple Street, because if it had just been any one or two of them, you wouldn't have had the same result. It was definitely partly about this mob mentality.
It's a great call. That's a great call. So let's start talking about the actual meat of this episode. I loved right off the bat how casual. So when what we find out is an alien ship flies overhead and lands before everything crazy starts happening. And everyone comes running out of their houses. They're like, did you see that flash of light and the sound and all this stuff? And they're like, oh, don't worry. It was probably just a meteor landing. And the people are so casual that they're just acting like this is some sort of everyday occurrence that made me laugh so hard that I was like, what? I think I'd be more freaked out that we're in the midst of a meteor shower than the unlikely event that there's aliens actually landing on our planet. But everyone was just like, oh, don't worry. It's just a meteor. They mess with all. And I know I've said this almost every episode. I did appreciate once again that they didn't immediately jump to the most ridiculous explanation for it. They tried to explain it away. They're like sunspots and meteor showers that messes with electricity. It's just something like that. It's not aliens until.
Well, can I push back
Sure.
a little bit and say, yes, they did say it was something else, which I think that when they first run out and they're like, oh, it was just a meteor, I thought was foreshadowing of how dumb these people were. Because so we don't actually see it, right? The way it's shot is all looking at them, and but it takes place over a period of time because they cycle through a whole bunch of shots, kind of showing everybody looking up at the sky, and we see these like flashing lights and these weird sci-fi sounds that I'm just going to say sound like what in a sci-fi movie a spaceship sounds like. So the sound and these flashing lights, and that it's going on for quite some time, is not a meteor. And they're all watching it. It wasn't like they ran out after, like, I heard something weird. What was it? Like, oh, maybe it was a meteor. Like, they're all looking at it like, well, I just saw this flying disc fly over us, like emanating strange sounds. And then it landed on that mountain. Probably a meteor. Like, they're just dumb. But to your other point, yeah, they try very briefly, and this is one I will eventually cut some slack because of the time frame they have to work in, which I know is something we talk about a lot on here and what you can do in 22 minutes versus a feature. But they all get on board with this. There's aliens who look like us very quickly with zero evidence or even trying to explore any other possibility. Basically, as soon as the kid raises the idea, they're all like, that's it.
Yeah, and that kind of bothered me because that's 2 episodes in a row. Because if you remember from Mirror Image, our main character at the end, she's just like, wait a minute, I remember reading somewhere about these parallel dimensions and people coming into our parallel dimensions and trying to take over.
I want to know what these people are reading, because I think she was reading the same comic that this kid was. Right,
and it was the exact same thing. Some 12-year-old kid just wanders up and he's like, I read about this and this is what's happening. And you're right, they do 100% accept it. But at least they tried to make some. That is true, I guess. Though the second they had something to grasp onto, they're like, "Well, that's probably it."
Well, it did occur to me that part of that might be a commentary by Serling about people in general, and maybe it wasn't specifically that these people were dumb, although they clearly were, which we have multiple pieces of evidence we can discuss about that. But that, people just want an explanation. They want something to latch on to. And I'm thinking of, right now with what's going on with the pandemic, and you'll hear the president just say should I put in our customary, this isn't a politics podcast, but
wait, there's a pandemic.
So we got that out of the way. I know you normally don't leave your house, but there's actually nobody's allowed to leave their house right now.
I sure hope it didn't kill Kim Jong-un.
So, but he'll get up and say something that is clearly false, clearly wrong, but it gives people some explanation or something to latch onto. And I think that even goes back to the campaign, and that's a whole nother thing we could talk about. But things about the sort of xenophobia, concern about it's these immigrants doing this is the problem, and people responded to it. A lot of people did. That there are these complex things. There's not necessarily an easy solution, and what people want is just tell me some explanation that I can just latch onto and hold in my head really easily, and I'm not going to examine it too deeply. And so I wonder if maybe these people weren't unusually dumb. Maybe it's a commentary on the dumbness of American society as a whole. But it was pretty amazing how quickly they all latched onto what the kid said. Oh, I read something like this in a comic book, without any attempt to even think about or try some alternative explanation, like, hey, let's go over a block and see what things look like over there. Hey, they were originally going to walk to the police station. Let's do that, see if they know anything. Now, as soon as the kid throws out the explanation, we're like, okay, yeah, we got it figured out. Now we just need to figure out who the aliens are.
Well, and the kid did say that in the book or the comic book or whatever, the aliens are turning the stuff off so they can't leave. They don't want them to leave. But let's just flat out say, if we're going to, let's get into this COVID stuff. So if the kid had been a scientist, nobody would have listened to him, and they would have been like, hey, no, this kid doesn't know what the hell he's talking about. Let's listen to uneducated morons about the whole thing. But let's get into this. So there were tons of...
Sorry, I have to bring up another thing related to that. Somebody was talking to me the other day about this, and like, don't they have you ever watched the movies? And in the movies, it's always the scientist who's right and nobody listens. And when you're watching the movie, everyone at this point is like, listen to the scientist, you know, they're going to ignore him and you're going to face hell. And then as soon as it happens in real life, everyone does exactly what happens in the movies.
Right.
Like, why should we listen to these people who study this and know what's going on?
It reminds me of Scream when they're like, don't go upstairs. And then she's, of course, Drew Barrymore, I think it was, whoever it was, then of course goes upstairs, or Neve Campbell, because that's her only option. So,
right.
Yeah.
We're all living in Scream.
Yeah. So there are plenty of parallels to COVID. So I did like that immediately. This Maple Street community is clearly very closely knit. Everyone immediately comes pouring out of their houses the second something starts happening in the sky, and they all start talking and sharing their story. They completely gaslight the kid, who has some guess at least of what's going on. And just like the scientist, he tries to warn them to stay at home and just basically back off. Then the main character, Steve, I think, also is like, hey, just go back into your house, because they get suspicious of, by the way, did you catch the name of the guy whose car was turning on and off?
It was Les something, right?
Les Goodman is who they thought was an alien. And I was like, this is literally the Better Call Saul breaking, like Saul Goodman, but literally the guy they thought was an alien, his name was Les Goodman. It was amazing.
That's the kind of thing you put into the first draft of the script, like a little inside joke, and then just somebody forgot to change by the time they were shooting. Right.
So, of course, then there was just all the paranoia of not, and we've seen this in a million different forms in cinema, the paranoia of not knowing who's an alien, who's to be trusted. I mean, The Thing is, we've mentioned before, is probably my favorite example of it, but everyone, of course, is paranoid. So they're all watching each other. Charlie, the heavyset guy in the worst Hawaiian shirt I've ever seen, is they're basically staking each other out, not knowing who is an alien, not knowing who they can trust, just like people in the grocery stores now. People swinging a wide berth around each other on the sidewalks, even when you do run into people or in grocery stores, because no one can be trusted.
Yeah, although what I think has been really sort of fascinating about what's happening now is there's this really interesting way in which all the behaviors are sort of reversed. Like the thing that, normally would be, oh, you see somebody coming across to the other side of the street, or they're in the grocery aisle and like, oh, I'm just going to hang at the end of the aisle and like wait till they're done because I don't want to go by them. That normally would be like really creepy or offensive somehow, like they're judging you, is actually considered like a positive. You're like, oh, thank you. And the person who like barrels right towards you and like, what in normal times would be like, oh, hey, they're coming over to say hi. You're like, what is wrong? Stay away from me. It's all the norms are reversed of kind of the inherent meanings of those things.
Which is a perfect segue into this note that I wrote down. So the normal behavior. So Les Goodman is accused basically
because
because
the last name, but that's hilarious.
He's outside like late at 3 a.m, just looking up at the stars. And this lady, who by the way is also up at 3 a.m. doing God knows what.
I had exactly the same thought. Like, wait, you're out there looking at him. So what was your reason? Yeah,
that's like when you accuse someone of always being on Facebook. They're like, but every time you see me on Facebook, you're also on Facebook. But the normal behavior, the guy Les Goodman just had insomnia. So that normal behavior of insomnia turns into accusations. And Les Goodman has a really, really good line that this is paraphrasing it a little bit, but he's like, you scared, frightened rabbits. You're starting something here that's a nightmare. Like it was us starting the thing. And the frustrating thing for me so far about the pandemic has been being treated, because Kelsey probably thought I was nuts, because I was super scared about this thing in February when we were first hearing about it. Mm-hmm. And I think there were a lot of people that were actually really scared about it. Maybe anyone that's taken a communicable diseases class. And it was so frustrating, people not taking it seriously right off the bat. And now we see this as a situation we're in, whereas had it maybe been taken seriously right off the bat and not, again, we're not a political podcast, but if there had been some sort of, if there had been some sort of direction or some sort of clear commandment from the top, we might not be in this situation. But we are essentially the ones who created the situation by ignoring initial stay-at-home things. People are still ignoring stay-at-home things. Idiots, rednecks are protesting. And yes, you are rednecks if you're out there protesting with an M16 or whatever AR-15. You're a redneck. You're a horrible person, and I hope you get sick.
I think they used that on SNL the other night.
Yes.
Was like, and what are you going to do with your gun? Shoot the virus?
Yes, that's right. That's right. By the way, another good stay-at-home episode of SNL. I really enjoyed it.
It was. Kenan Thompson continues to prove he is like the all-star of, the last 20 years of SNL. Just like, and he's rarely been the star. There's always, people who break out more and are bigger names, a Will Ferrell or Amy Poehler,
Kristen
Wiig. But he is just so solid in everything he does.
Yeah, he's hilarious.
He's like that guy. This is going to be like a bad analogy, but I have football in the mind because they just had the NFL draft and like the first thing out of the sports world for like the past 6 weeks.
There was a WNBA draft too. Do not ignore that.
That's fair. Who was the top pick in that? I did not catch it.
Skylar Evans.
Very good. Who was the top pick in the NFL draft?
The quarterback from the LSU.
Way to go, Mike. Can pull the name of the WNBA number one and not the NFL. I had to think who the NFL one was.
The WNBA one, I don't think is a real person.
You just made that
answer.
I don't know. I was watching the NFL, or I was not watching it, but keeping up with it, just see who the Packers picked. And so basically I ignore all the picks until the Packers. Anyway, the bad NFL analogy I was going to make.
So did the Bears.
Was like... Kenan Thompson is not like your all-star, all-pro quarterback, but he's that guy who you drafted in like the second round who just, you're going to keep signing to another contract, because whatever job he's in, he's always solid. You never have to worry about him, and he may not make the big headlines, but is just like one of those people you build your team around. And it reminded, and I have to throw one more from SNL. They brought back that skit he does, What's Up With That?
Yeah, what up with that?
What up with that? Which I have always found hilarious, and it had been so long, and I was so excited to see it back. And Jessica commented, she's like, it actually kind of makes more sense on Zoom than it did in real life.
With that, reminder, let's have a quick reminder. We're not an SNL podcast. And then let's take a quick break, and we'll come back and keep discussing The Monsters Are Due on Maple Street, because I'm sure we still have a lot to say.
All right, and we're back still talking about The Monsters Are Due on Maple Street. And Mike, you had mentioned Les's line about they're all like rabbits, and this is actually the last line right before the midpoint commercial break. And he says, "You're letting something begin here that's a nightmare," which I just had to note. So I'm totally on board with him. I liked everything you said about they're starting this like the monster is us. That was one of the weakest, like, going into a commercial, like, cliffhangers that we've had. And we've had a couple of really good ones in the past few episodes. Just last week in Mirror Image, the cliffhanger was it's the first time we actually get a close-up of the main character's doppelganger in the bus kind of looking mischievous and looking back and seeing. And it turned out that there was no payoff to that. So I'm not arguing that was a great moment, but it was a great, like, it really kind of spun the episode and like made you like, wait a minute, the doppelganger is real. What the heck is going on? And that's something I think generally Twilight Zone has done pretty well at finding good spots for commercial breaks that leave you with a little bit of a cliffhanger wanting to come back in. And I just thought ending with that like line and push in on less was one of the weakest ones they've had in a while.
Fair, but there are also some other very good lines that were not commercial break lines that I can launch into here.
No, there's a lot of really good lines here. And while we're still on Les, one of the things they said about his insomnia looking at the stars was any guy who'd spend his time looking up at the sky that early in the morning, there's something wrong with. I think that was Charlie who said that. And this again felt to me a little, I'm going to make a stretch or a leap here, but it felt a little kind of anti-science. Like, why are you showing curiosity about the world and looking at the stars and things? That's communist talk. Because let's be honest, this is all very Red Scare as well.
And, totally. And I think this is probably in the same speech because I have a note for Charlie. He says, under normal circumstances, we'd let it go by, but these aren't normal circumstances. And I think that is exactly what you were talking about the things that were maybe considered rude or xenophobic or racist with crossing to the other side of the street, those kinds of things. The situation we're in is such a heightened situation of awareness. Like I'm sure you've been walking around, been in a line for something or where someone steps on the back of your heel, like that they're that close to you. That would be like a I think I would turn around and take a swing at someone under these circumstances in this situation that we're in. So these crazy heightened circumstances that that the Maple Street residents were in this episode and that we're in right now because of the coronavirus, because of COVID-19. Sorry.
And also the thing, you don't want to say the China virus.
Wuhan flu.
But even the line, like in normal times, we just sort of let that slide, like speaks to this kind of inherent disdain. Like, well, he's looking at the stars. I guess that's okay because we're not in trouble. But like, why is that a problem in the first place? Let him look at the stars. And I have to say, when you talk about the stepping on your heels, during like the very first week of social distancing, and it might have been before that was sort of like official policy and we were all required to do it as sort of like recommended. I was at the grocery store picking some stuff up and I'm like at the Apple thing, getting some apples. And some guy literally comes up and like can't wait the 3 seconds it would have taken me to finish picking him up, like reaches his arm over my shoulder to start picking out apples himself, like breathing down my neck. I'm like, this would be uncomfortable in normal times. Like,
Agreed.
Wait 3 seconds. And so instead I like just like dropped the apple. I like walked away, stood there and like gave him a dirty look, which he of course ignored because he was a dick. And like finished doing his thing. But I'm like, what is wrong with you people?
Well, I have my story from that. I went early on to Costco to kind of stock up on some stuff. When
you bought all the toilet paper, didn't you?
No, there was none left by the time I got there. It was very surreal. But as I was walking through Costco, I texted Kelsey. I was like, this place is like one wet cough away from it just erupting into a complete riot, into complete hysteria. And toward the end of this episode, after the shooting, the hysteria they accidentally shoot this farmer because he is a very humanoid looking alien. He's literally just walking down the street toward them and they shoot him because they think he's an alien. And that just makes the whole thing just erupt into complete bedlam. And it reminded me of being in Costco. And I was like, this place, I've never felt so like heightened at a Costco. Like I was like, I could see this turning into a riot very quickly. And it was just that one snap of the tension. And in this case of Maple Street, it was literally the roar of a shotgun was what just made everyone turn on each other.
You know, I've been at Costco a couple of times since the shelter at home, once pretty early on and then once just within the past week. And the time I was there this past week, one of the things I noted was so I'm not sure what things are like in Chicago. In Dallas County, you're required to have some kind of mask face covering. And
not yet.
There was some guy who like was arguing with him at the entrance that he didn't want to wear it. And then I saw on like the same guy on 3 different occasions in the Costco had like pulled his mask down and an employee had to come over and like tell him, sir, you need to wear your mask. And I was like, at what point do you just kick that guy out? Like this isn't even store policy. This is just, he's being a dick, endangering everybody, not following a law at this point. But the first time I was at Costco, shortly after this started, and I agreed with you about the heightened tension, I have to say, dirty little secret, I kind of liked part of it because normally, at least at the Costco's by us, most of the people seem to treat that like that's their entertainment for the week. So I'm going to go to Costco. I'm going to wander around aimlessly, 4 people
Block the
wide,
aisle.
stopping in
Yep.
every aisle with no idea what we're looking for or doing. If there's a sample anywhere, I'm going to sit there for half an hour with my entire family, blocking the whole aisle so nobody can get through. And I kind of liked being there when like everyone who was there didn't really want to be there and was there on a purpose. Like, I'm getting this stuff and leaving, was actually kind of refreshing because I just have never gotten the idea of let's go to Costco and that'll be our, outing for the weekend and we'll make a day of it.
Especially with the food courts being closed. I totally agree with you. The other thing that really made this parallel COVID, what's going on with COVID, was the thought that all of this would have been completely fine if they had just stuck together. Well, and I guess the opposite, but it united as people and as residents and as neighbors and trusted one another and trusted what they knew of one another.
Mm-hmm.
And again, one of the most frustrating things about COVID is that people are forgetting that we're all humans. And like, I'm about to start reading a book on the Spanish flu. Whatever you should, the PC way of calling it. But the
I think it's the China flu.
But if everyone would just not lose their humanity and have the good graces to accept that we're all stuck in this together for one way or another, and going out and socializing with people and disobeying these rules is not just about you. It's about the good of this species. And we're all such a bunch of selfish dicks that it's super frustrating to watch. I think I've mentioned this before. We were out walking the dogs about a week and a half ago or so, after the shelter in place was already in order. And in our town, you could see across this retention pond into other people's backyards. And there's a group of probably 20 neighbors just sitting around a fire pit. And like, yeah, maybe they were keeping their 6 feet of distance, but like, you couldn't freaking wait until this was over. Like, I'm like socializing with people more now that we're sheltering at home, because like buddies from Notre Dame that I haven't spoken to or haven't seen, some of them other than a reunion this past fall, that I haven't really spoken to in 20 years, are like, hey, let's get together every week and play video games or like and I'm like, oh, cool, this is great. But like, we're only doing this because of COVID-19. Like, we would never have done this, except everyone's so bored of their families, I guess, that not me, of course, but everyone else is so bored of their families that it's a very strange time to live in this country.
Well, I admire your optimism that you thought there was any hope things would be different than people being selfish a-holes. Like,
No, I remember have any optimism.
I was talking with another parent of one of my kids' friends, kind of right when things were starting. So things hadn't really made it over to the U.S., but they were starting to worry about the travel restrictions and things like that.
Oh, it was already here, I'm sure. But
right. Well, but I mean, before it was, like our kids were still in school at that point.
Sure. Yeah.
And she was telling me about, somebody she knew who was like, well, screw that. I have a trip planned and I'm going wherever the hell I want because it's my vacation. And it was already at the point where like, clearly you shouldn't be going on optional travel.
Right.
And it just struck me. And I think the Monsters on Maple Street is a good indication of it. Like, people are inherently selfish and stupid and don't care about each other. And it's really, when you were saying like, yeah, I wish things could be, well, like I wish they could, but there was zero chance when these restrictions were implemented that everyone's gonna be like, yes, I will do what's for the good of everybody. Right. There was always going to be, I've been honestly really pleasantly shocked at how many people have followed the rules and
I do agree.
Tried to do things for the good. Honestly, humanity has behaved much better than I expected, but yes, there's still a large contingent who is remain total selfish dicks.
I do agree. And the perfect example, to get back to this episode, in this episode of The Selfish Dick, is Charlie, the guy in the Hawaiian shirt, the heavyset guy. He's trying to save his own skin because they start turning to him. And he's like, no, because his lights go on. And so they think that he's in cahoots. And he's the one who shoots the farmer. So they think he's in cahoots with the monsters or the aliens. And so he swears to everyone that he knows who the alien is. And he blames the kid, like the 12-year-old, 14-year-old, whatever he was, kid, to save his own ass. And that's the level of disheartening that I feel like, and I do agree with you, people are being better than I thought they would. It's so sad, though, to think that people don't value our survival as a species more than going to spring break in Daytona Beach or going to like the neighborhood barbecue with their friends in my neighborhood. It's embarrassing. And like everyone that's like, oh, well, I can't miss this. I can't miss that. It's like, well,
you can.
You absolutely can. And you can make up for this and everything can be made up. And this isn't that big a deal. And like, I'm looking at, Kelsey's students, 8th graders, my niece is in 8th grade, my nephew's a junior, like has missed his junior prom. Like there are people that are actually having like missing like life. I remember my 8th grade graduation. I remember my junior prom. Well, I didn't go to my junior prom. I remember my senior prom. Those are big like life moments that aren't just like, hey, we go to Mexico every winter, so that's what we're going to do and screw you, humanity. It's like people are actually missing, like they've missed concerts. I've missed shows. I had a class canceled. Like people are missing like more seminal events than you going on freaking spring break. It's so frustrating.
And then you have the people protesting with the sign like, I need a haircut.
Yeah.
Like cut your own damn hair or have longer hair for a month. It'll be fine.
No one's going to see you. That's the whole beauty of sheltering at home. We're living it up here.
Well, again, to be the rare time I'm going to speak positively of humanity. I will say with the people protesting, I think they're getting a lot of coverage and it's this tiny minority. And if you've seen some of the footage, like, yes, when the photographer's like down there on the ground with them, it looks busy. And then it pulls out and there's like out of the entire state of Wisconsin, there's, 100 people who showed up. True. And they're all being organized by, and funded by these conservative NRA linked groups because stupidity finds stupidity. I wanted to throw out,
and I will just really quickly, I will say that 100 people in Wisconsin is like 3 tons worth of people too.
I'm not even going to touch that one. Being a Wisconsinite myself, although, oddly, for a long time I was like, yeah, I live in Texas. I'm from Wisconsin, and Wisconsin has been so stupid the past several elections now, the past like 12 or 15 years, that I'm like, in another 10 years, I'm probably just going to want to say I'm from Texas because Texas is at least trending smarter and Wisconsin's trending stupider. Yeah. Although, not to be outdone, we still have stupid Dan Patrick here. Like, there are more important, that's our lieutenant governor. There are more important things than living. Like what? That's literally the important thing.
Well, at least you don't live in Vegas where the mayor offered up the city of Vegas as a control. Did you see that interview? Apparently, the mayor of Vegas, first of all, is like 1,000 years old. And she essentially offered up the people of Las Vegas as a control group to see if it's actually working that we're sheltering at home. And it was amazing. Anderson Cooper was like, so wait a minute, if this happens, he's like, are you going to go and sit on the casino floors every night and like expose yourself to this? She's like, no, I've got a family to feed. And he's like, well, fuck you then. Yeah, I love Anderson Cooper, but it was kind of amazing. Anyhow, we should talk about this episode too.
Did this episode, bring it back to the episode. Did this remind you a little bit of The Burbs, the Tom Hanks movie?
Yes.
And
great one.
So it was very, very similar. But you know what? That's a comedy, and this is meant to be more of a social commentary.
Sure.
What I liked about that one, and where even those characters who, let's be honest, behave pretty stupidly, were smarter than the characters in this episode, is they get this theory that their neighbors are, murdering people and burying them in the backyard. And they get it based on pretty limited information. Like, well, I saw one of them digging in the backyard one time. Well, they must be murderers.
He wasn't looking at the stars though, so he's probably fine.
Well, that's okay. It's okay if you're burying bodies, just don't look at the stars. But they then concoct these elaborate schemes to break into their house and try to get evidence and get information. So even they had some idea like, well, hey, just because we think this is the case, we should probably try to make sure. Meanwhile, Charlie's like, well, this kid said he read a story in a comic book. I'm going to just shoot anybody who comes walking down the street. And that whole scene was just bizarre because this guy's walking down the street toward him. And yes, okay, maybe that guy should have like yelled like, hey, why are you guys all hanging out in the street? So they'd recognize his voice.
And pointing that gun at me.
But they don't, but he's like still like 50, 60 yards off. So I would say Charlie has good aim, but it's a shotgun. I think you can hit the broadside of a barn pretty easily. But they don't say like, hey, who is that? Don't come any closer or anything like that. They just see somebody walking down the street 100 yards away, nowhere near getting close to them or being in imminent danger. And Charlie just starts shooting into the dark and kills him. Like, that's your first reaction. Like, this isn't even like shoot first, ask questions later. This is like shoot zeroth, then first look and see if you can see what's going on. And then after that, go to the dead body and ask questions.
Well, as a Chicagoan, that I believe is what our police department is actually trained to do. And it also, that reminded me of South Park when they're like, he's coming right for us. And they shoot I don't even remember what episode that was. It was 20 years ago at this point. But yeah, it just that excuse kind of to shoot at the poor old farmer.
There's the Futurama where they go to get Bender's brain out of the central bureaucracy. There's a guy on like this really slow scooter, like, get out of the way. And he's coming and they've like cleared the aisle and are like another 50 yards down the road when he's like, I can't stop. And then like, crashes at 0.2 miles per hour into the wall.
Isn't that also, was that Austin Powers with the steamroller? Or is it Naked Gun? Maybe. Yeah. I think
it might be both. I think they've reused that. Okay. Doesn't Deadpool also have it? Oh, that's a Zamboni he runs over someone with, but not at super slow speed. I will say, and so for all the times I'm saying these people are stupid, I will give them one positive note. When Les first appears, the person they think is an alien because he's out looking at the stars at night, certainly his performance is doing all he can to reinforce the idea that he's an alien. God. It's like zero emotion, and like he keeps saying the same lines over and over, like he's trying to mimic human language but was only given a limited number of things. It reminded me of in the more recent Jumanji movies, not the Robin Williams one, but the ones where they're inside a video game, they have like non-player characters in it, and so whatever they say to them, they can only say like their 2 lines back, and he's like, I can't understand it, it just doesn't make sense. I can't understand it, it just doesn't make sense. I'm like, okay, this guy is an alien, I'm with him.
Well, and Charlie was also a horrendous actor, I thought.
I thought the acting across the board in this episode was pretty much horrible from all of them. The main character, it was Steve Brand, who should have been called Steve Bland.
Burn.
But like, there was like whether he was being accused of being an alien or like just talking to his neighbors in the beginning before things get bad. It was exactly the same level of emotion and everything. Oh my God. The acting in this one was horrible.
Before we get too off of the COVID thing, one more connection that I noticed in this episode, Les Goodman, considering this was a black and white episode, you could see how gross his tan was. And it made me, did you notice this? It made me think of Trump. Like you could see the like orange sheen of his skin. Even though it was a black and white episode, it drove me insane. He looked so disgusting.
Can I throw out a couple of
absolutely
a couple of lines from Charlie who came across to me like, do you remember the drunk uncle character on SNL? That's who Charlie is.
Okay.
He also was kind of like the one guy in The Burbs who I think might actually have been wearing a Hawaiian shirt, although I can't say that for sure.
Yeah, his best friend, I guess, or like his closest friend. Yeah, totally.
So that guy was like an update of Charlie.
Even looked like him.
So after he shoots the guy and they figure out, oh wait, this was our friend. He gets 2 lines. First, he came out of the darkness. How was I supposed to know who he was? And like, I don't know. Wait till he's within 100 yards of you and then ask him a question.
You're right.
And then second, and this one really hit me. Says, I was only trying to protect my home. I didn't know it was somebody we knew. And I think that speaks so much to the American psychology that like, If it was a stranger, it would have been okay that I
Yes.
just shot him. The only reason it's bad is because it's someone I knew, not because it was another human, because we don't care about other humans. We care about our tribe. And if it was, the fact that it was somebody from their block was what made it bad, not that he just randomly shot somebody for no reason.
That is a great call, because like all these people, all these protesters, all the kids that were on spring break, they're like, "Oh, I'll just get it and get over it." All it's going to take is one parent that dies in a hospital alone to switch their vote or switch their attitude or make them realize what a serious thing this is. Because right now it's insane numbers in the United States, because we are apparently the stupidest country in responding to a pandemic. But like it's right now, it's just numbers unless you know someone. And I haven't lost anyone, fortunately, but I have a friend from Notre Dame that had it. And then I have another friend from school that both of his parents had it. And fortunately, all three recovered. But like that's close enough for me. That's close enough to touching me and touching someone that I love to realize how arrogant you are to not treat human life as human life.
But again, it's as long as it's not affecting me. Yeah, I've seen several people on social media that unfortunately some of my former students who are very much that like, look, in my age range, this isn't going to do anything to me. We need to open everything back up, which makes me feel very sad that we gave them a degree, because clearly we did not teach them any level of critical thinking. But yeah, it's like this is unlikely to affect me, so why should I care?
Which is also bullshit, because it could kill you too.
Right. Well, and you mentioned that you know some people who've had it and thankfully recovered, and I've only known a couple of people who have had it and have also recovered, so I'm thankful for that. But also the evidence seems to be that the social distancing and the precautions and shutting everything down as much as they could, despite some people's best efforts to be dumb, has worked. And just imagine how many more people you would know who would have had it without that.
Exactly
and
right.
Some fraction of those would have died. I mean, part of the reason probably that you don't know anyone who's died of it is because way less people have gotten it than would have otherwise.
You're exactly right. And as insanely out of control as it is in this country, my buddy was in the hospital for 2 weeks. I mean, he's my age, so he's early 40s, and he's a healthy guy. He was like knocked out for 2 weeks. We hadn't even heard from him, and all of a sudden he popped back into our kind of text chain. I was like, "Oh yeah, I had it." It was crazy. We're like, "What the hell?"
And this is the other thing where a lot of these people are just being really dumb in terms of, so let's go ahead and just assume that some fraction of people, probably like 90%, are just going to be stupid assholes. Even if you're purely selfish and just concerned about yourself, these people are interpreting the data totally wrong, because they're
Exactly.
like, well, my odds of dying from this are very low. Okay, fair enough. It could still be you, but yes, your odds of dying are very low. That doesn't mean your odds of getting it, of being hospitalized for quite a while, of being in danger of death, of having serious long-term ramifications, because there is, and I mean, I know this is, still early and we're going to have to wait and kind of see what all the data shows, but definitely some fraction of people who are recovering from this and not getting killed by it have permanent lung damage. So they're just factoring in like, well, I'm not likely to die from it, and it's like a binary. That means everything would be okay. No, even if you don't die from it, that could still affect you significantly, even if you only care about yourself.
And by the way, a 2-week hospital stay in the United States is as good as a death sentence, because good luck crawling out from underneath that crippling debt for the rest of your freaking life, because our country sucks.
Yeah.
You can quote me
You
on
don't
that.
have to tell me about
I do
that.
not like the United States.
I had premature twins who were in the hospital in the NICU, which is like about the most expensive place they could possibly be, for multiple months.
Yep. Yeah.
So, yeah. Bringing it back to the episode.
Yeah.
This has turned into the COVID podcast, which I've liked.
Mirror image.
Actually, let me. So I was the one who started us off saying I want to talk about these bigger issues, which I still do, and I think has been great. I do have some things specific to the episode that aren't about the bigger issues. One of them was a plot question.
Wait, hang on. Let me get this in then real quick. Before you move away from your comments about Charlie and how he shot him, he's like, how was I to know? How was I to know? You know what that reminded me of? Do you remember the 1980s movie Clue, with Tim Curry and
Yes, that movie's amazing.
And Michael McKean. Yeah. So Michael McKean is Mr. Green. He like slaps, I think it was Miss Scarlet, or I think it was Yvette that he slaps her, and he turns and he's like, everyone's staring at him. He's like, I had to stop her from screaming. And when Charlie's explaining why he shot the farmer, I was like, that reminded me so much, because everyone's just staring at him. It reminded me so much of that line from Clue when he's like, I had to stop her from screaming. It was great.
And I'm thinking of the scene from Airplane with the hysterical woman
yes.
where everyone's lining up that we talked about last week.
Yeah. Sorry. Okay,
yeah,
go
Clue,
ahead.
by the way, great movie. And
Clue's
for
the
those
best.
who are too young for it, if you see it now, you actually see they kind of do like the ending,
All the
like,
endings.
but it could have ended like this. But what if this happened? That was this really unique experiment where if you saw it in the theater, there were 3 different endings and you only saw one.
Right.
And what theater you went to, just they had gotten shipped one of the endings kind of at random. So you could go to a different theater and see the movie and it might end differently.
Yep.
That was an amazing idea. The thing I was going to bring up was as a plot thing. So they have all the electronics and stuff are broken down, but then Les's car sort of magically starts up on its own. Different people's lights are flickering off and on their own. And at the end, we do get the explanation from the aliens that they're basically like, well, you turn off all the power and then randomly turn some things on and off, and the people turn on each other because they're stupid. My question was for the people themselves, even being as dumb and jumping to this conclusion of, yes, this comic book idea is what's happening as quickly as they did, why are they thinking that whoever's lights turn on and off is somehow a sign of that person being an alien? Like, if the aliens are that smart to like get in here and infiltrate us, are they going to also like put a sign on their front door that says, hey, we're aliens? Like, that seemed like such a random thing to then attach to right from the get-go. Like, wait, Les's car turned on by itself. He must be an alien. Like, Les was nowhere near it. That's maybe his car's an alien is a more likely conclusion.
Okay, can I tell you an anecdote about the insanity of humanity, though?
Yes, please do.
So I can't remember if this was my senior year of college or my third year of law school, but it was toward the end of my time at Notre Dame, one of the 2 times, and there was we had our own power station that supplied the campus, and apparently a raccoon chewed through a power cable and knocked out, and it was finals week, and all of the power to the entire university went completely out. And it was like a Sunday night, the day before the start of finals, or the night before the start of finals at like 9 p.m. And I swear to God, the thin line between Irish Catholic, nerdy, conservative, upper middle class students and straight up Lord of the Flies was just that power switch getting flipped off, because people were like streaking the campus. They were like lighting just taking couches out and just lighting them on fire, lighting trees on fire. The fire department was chasing like people around the campus, putting out fires. It was complete insanity. I was like, what the hell is that? And it was just like this, like, sort of like we kind of mentioned with Costco, that heightened tension. And that was literally all it took, was just the power going out for everyone to just revert to complete insanity. So I believe it.
That reminds me of the Sherry Bobbins episode of The Simpsons where she that's the Mary Poppins parody, and she gets them all sorted out and everything's great. And they're like, thank you, you taught us so much. She leaves the house and remembers she forgot something. She's been out a second and a half, comes back in, and everyone's running around naked. The couch is on fire.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. That is, so I could believe that they were just looking for any sort of, I agree with you that it was insane, but they were looking for any sort of insane, because right then they're sitting there thinking that, hey, aliens, there's aliens among us and we have to find them. So whatever is, why would he have electricity? I mean, I don't have electricity because he's in cahoots with the aliens. Maybe there's a quid pro quo with the aliens where they offered to shoot a farmer and they offered electricity back. But that's not a quid pro quo. That's just a deal.
Did you notice that until like you said, they were looking for any explanation? When all the power and everything goes out, did you notice that until the kid brings up the thing about the aliens, they all forget that there was just this meteor that went through the sky? Because you mentioned they try to use that as an explanation, well, it's that or sunspots or something. That comes up after the kid raises his explanation. Before that, they're like, somehow all the power's gone. What could it have possibly been? Even though literally 3 seconds ago, they were all like, what was that giant thing going on in the sky that looked like a giant meteor?
Well, to be fair, they did kind of connect it because one guy was like, well, it could have been because of the meteor. He's like, that's what, like, sunspots wreak havoc with electricity. So they did at least sort of try and connect it. But yeah, they were a little bit jumping from point to point.
But my point is, the sunspot thing comes up after the kid suggests the...
Oh, did he? Okay.
Yeah, like that wasn't their first thought, which it should have been. Also, I don't believe any of these people is smart enough to comprehend what a sunspot is, much less a meteor, or a meteor, much less a sunspot, I should say.
True.
Did you also like... I wrote down some things never change when the kid first gives his explanation, and there's like the brief, maybe 10 seconds of the episode where they like, oh, it's just a kid, before Steve Bland is like, let him talk. And he's like, yeah, I saw it in this comic book. And someone's like, you know, those kids, too much comic books and movies. I'm like, that's exactly what someone would say today.
100%. And it's funny when you mentioned Les Goodman kind of repeating the same thing over and over again. The last line from the Aliens, when they're like, we're going to just go street to street, one to the other, one to the other, one to the other. And he just repeats it 3 times. I was like, that was a weird choice for the Aliens.
The whole alien thing at the end was very weird, just in the way it was staged and written, and they were dressed and everything. It almost felt like a kind of like they had done the whole episode, and I'm not saying it was like added into the script. Like I had the sense that was part of the script from the get-go, but like the production manager forgot they were going to have to shoot it at the end. Like, we need a couple aliens and they're supposed to be controlling this stuff. They're like, right, let me see what I got in the closet.
I did like, and it was kind of repeated in the closing narration, but the aliens at one point say, the world is full of maple streets. And I really loved that line. Like, this is humans being humans, and we know exactly how they're going to react because they're such idiots and so distrustful of each other and paranoid. But it was such a cool line. It's the world is full of maple streets. Another,
I like that.
I want to give some, like, because like I really did like this episode, and I think there's been some negative things that we've been saying about it. That's
also a running theme of our podcast. Right. Is every episode there's the moment where you say that.
Right. It's not a political podcast, and we actually did really like this episode. But I really liked when they do show the aliens. First of all, it was a cool shot kind of overlooking Maple Street and just the chaos that was happening beneath them. But then I don't know if you were paying attention to this, because on my second or third watch through, I was like, oh, wait, I want to make sure I look for this. Did you notice that all the neighborhoods right around Maple Street were all lit up just fine? Yes. So if they would have just taken the time and just walked a couple blocks over, they would have been completely fine. But instead they just isolate, and that was maybe another COVID tie-in, that since they were so isolated in their own bubble that they went nuts instead of just like thinking and being rational. I thought that was kind of neat though.
You also know how much humans like walking.
Right.
I was thinking of
Charlie,
the scene from LA Story, which granted that's LA and it's also a comedy, but where Steve Martin like goes out the front door, gets in his car, drives it to the next house and gets back out and goes up to the door.
Another thing that I just want to drop in, it doesn't really have a segue here, but when they thought Charlie was the guy, they all are chasing him to his front porch, and they all stop and pick up stones. And there was a very Shirley Jackson Lottery feeling to it.
Yes.
And that symbolism that really stuck with me. It also reminded me a lot of, I just lost the thread of it, but I'm sure I'll come back to it. But yeah, the thought of the lottery. And I also really liked the montage of them it was maybe a little bit cheesy, but it was very frenetic. The montage of them all descending into chaos, like literally a revolver shoots, like someone got shot. Like it was kind of neat when it just went absolutely bananas.
Yeah, it was just this montage of extreme close-ups. And I agreed with you, it was a little bit cheesy, but I also kind of liked it because it made the focus not about like this particular person's doing this and this person's doing this. It's like all of this is just chaotic and nobody's behaving normally. And it doesn't matter who picked up the rock or who shot the revolver or who got hit by the rock or anything. It's just everybody has gone bye-bye.
Yeah.
So I liked that.
The other thing that I just remembered, so obviously mentioned the McCarthy trials, which obviously the Salem witch trials and the Scarlet Letter, all of those are tied together in the same paranoid. I had those same feelings, that same tone of this one.
Yeah, I saw a really interesting doc on CNN maybe a few months ago about the McCarthy era and the second Red Scare and everything that was going on there. And it was really fascinating because it's one of those things I knew the very vaguest outlines of and kind of the core concept of what had happened, but watching the details of it and how everything went down and how it eventually ended and stuff was really fascinating. I learned a ton from it. The other thing in a fictional world that I wanted to connect this to was Battlestar Galactica, which
yes,
I know we've
Yep.
talked about as one possibility for our next show to look at on Deja Reviewed. But the whole idea of, the Cylons look like us and they've infiltrated, which is not, I believe that's new to the remake. That I don't think was part of the original show. I think in the original, they all look like robots. But in the remake, where that's a big thing, and there's this really fascinating question, and I don't want to do spoilers because I don't remember how far along some of this information comes out, but the idea that, the Cylons could look like us and some of them might not even know they're Cylons. They might think they're human. And I think that's, we may get to that show as a whole later, but for anyone who has not watched Battlestar Galactica, the newer one, that's, easily one of the top 2 or 3 shows I've ever seen. It's fantastic all the way through. And
I heard the old version is very, very bad. So that will be very fun to watch if we actually watch
I'm leaning
one.
towards doing that as our next show.
Yeah.
For those who are wondering, we have made the decision we are not going to watch 166 or whatever episodes there are of Twilight Zone.
Wait, we decided that for real?
We did. We will go insane long before that.
That's an executive decision.
We're going to finish season 1 for sure and watch a few more episodes across some of the different seasons, different remakes. But then we will move on to another show. And I think BSG is probably our front runner at this point.
Yeah, for sure.
I want to throw out one other thing, and this is just kind of the last thing I had in my notes. I think that I'm about done with this episode then, in terms of things I wanted to say. And just going back to the COVID thing, when you mentioned if anyone who's taken a contagious disease class would know this, I was also going to say anyone who's played the board game Pandemic.
Yes.
And I just want to give a shout out if you have not played Pandemic. It's a fantastic board game. And really,
if you have an Xbox, there's a video game version on Game Pass.
Oh, cool. And if you have Steam and Tabletop Simulator, you can actually play the board game online, socially distanced with people around the country. I'm actually playing Pandemic with my family later this week.
Cool.
But
that's a Pandemic, Mark.
It's a fantastic game, but also, so I don't want to in any way pretend that game is scientifically accurate because it's not. But the way you see how much like what seems like a tiny little, oh, they got a couple cases of this disease here, how quickly, if that's not dealt with properly, that can just like spread and explode an epidemic across a whole continent. That's actually fairly accurate. Like it gives you, I mean, don't want to say it's numerically accurate or anything, but the idea of kind of how quickly these things can spread when left untreated, I think the game actually does a really good job illustrating that.
Very cool. Yeah, I do want to give that a try too. I just had a couple other thoughts and don't feel obligated to comment on these, but a couple cool, even though this is sort of your world, I thought there were some neat shots actually also in this one. I already mentioned the shot at the end of the on the spaceship or outside the spaceship overlooking the town. I thought was really neat. I thought it was really cool. Before they go and confront Les Goodman, they're showing them all their feet kind of storming across the street to confront him. And Steve's feet stop. And then it cuts back to him. He's like, let's not be a mob now. And it was, the shot was so neat. Like it was showing this sort of faceless mob coming across the street until Steve kind of wises up and is like, let's not be a mob. I thought that was pretty cool.
I agreed. I thought that was shot really cool, and showing him kind of stopping, like pulling himself out of the mob. Would have been better if then it hadn't been followed by the next shot is he just goes to the front of the mob and they all continue on.
He's like, I'll lead this mob. And then I thought this was another cool moment. everyone started accusing Steve because he had his wife, who, by the way, was being a little gossipy about him having a ham radio, was saying that he would spend hours in the basement working on his radio. And they're like, well, what's up with the radio? What's up with the radio? And they're like, well, I've never seen this radio. Just show us the radio. And I thought it was kind of a cool response by Steve, because he could have stopped it just by being like, fine, come down to the basement and see the radio. But instead, and I felt like this was also connected to all these protesters in COVID. I think they're wrong. I think Steve was right. But Steve was like, no, I'm not going to let you into my house. I'm not a monster. I'm not an alien. I'm not letting you in. And I think that that's what these morons think that they're doing by protesting, but it's not the same situation. But that again made me think a little bit of COVID, of the COVID situation. Anyhow.
All right.
I think that's about all I had. Did you have any other thoughts, or you want to get to the closing narration and some ratings?
I think let's move on. I was just going to say, since you were talking about the film aspects of the episode, there's some really nice deep focus in this episode, which we generally haven't seen in Twilight Zone. And I thought there were some cool framings with that, where like there was somebody in the foreground, then in the distant background, you also saw somebody come out. So nicely shot.
For us novices, can you explain a little bit more, just in an elevator pitch, of what deep focus means?
Deep focus meaning kind of like the whole shot's depth is in focus. So a lot of times you see something, if something's in focus in the foreground, the background's kind of like fuzzy, blurry. Right. And so deep focus is when the entire shot shows a lot. It shows a lot of depth, and the entire depth is in focus. So you could see, like, in some of the cases at the beginning, there's two people talking in the foreground, and then in the background you see somebody come out of a house 50 yards away, and they're in focus too. So I just thought it was nicely shot.
I had one more little nitpick of this episode about the acting, because as if I was directing this, I'd be like, what are you doing? At one point there's an old lady trying to get her phone to work, and by the way, I don't know if it was her son or there's like a April, July, or April, August, whatever relationship going on with the lady next door neighbors for Steve. But the lady's trying to get the phone to work, and she's like, operator. And she like flips the hang up thing up and down a couple times. She's like, operator. And then she puts the phone down and she's like, operator. And it's like, well, that's definitely not going to work. That just kind of bothered me. But I think that's all I have. So should we wrap this thing up?
Yeah, let's go ahead and wrap up.
Okay. So here is our closing narration. And we mentioned this at the beginning. This is definitely preachy, but this is probably my favorite closing narration so far. The tools of conquest do not necessarily come with bombs and explosions and fallout. There are weapons that are simply thoughts, attitudes, prejudices to be found only in the minds of men. For the record, prejudices can kill, and suspicion can destroy, and a thoughtless, frightened search for a scapegoat has a fallout all of its own for the children and the children yet unborn. And the pity of it is that these things cannot be confined to the Twilight Zone. And that last line is maybe the best line. That like gave me chills reading it. That may be the best line that Serling's ever written.
Yeah, well, because I was waiting as it goes on for the usual, where he ends with saying in the Twilight Zone, and right. These things happen in the Twilight Zone. I was like, oh, he's going to say that, it's going to like lose some of its oomph, because part of the point of this is it's not the Twilight Zone. This is like reality, how things would work. And then I love that he spins it around in those last line. These things cannot be confined to the Twilight Zone. That was so good.
It was, it was agreed that it was maybe a little bit preachy, but it needed to be preachy, because that was the whole message of this episode, is stop being shitheads to each other.
Well, and this came out 60 years ago, and clearly we haven't learned the lesson. So
agreed.
The preachiness was not preachy enough, I guess.
Agreed. So should we get to our sweat ratings?
Sure. The other thing I was thinking as I was listening to some of our episodes is we need to start having a mirror rating, like number and use of mirrors in the episode, because that's been such an ongoing theme. Sweat rating, 1. I didn't remember anyone being sweaty.
Oh, see, there was some sweat on Steve and Charlie like about halfway through the episode. I mean, there was some exertion, but I had like a 4, because like I didn't think it was super excessive, but I feel like the last couple episodes we haven't noticed any sweat, and I feel like there was sweat in this one.
And I'll be honest, I might just not have been paying attention to it. So if you said a 4, can I talk you down to a 3 and we'll call it that?
Sure. Fine with me. Okay. We're calling it a 3. Okay. Do you want to know some other 3s? No, who cares?
On the sweat rating, I'm okay.
No,
On the mirror rating, this was a 0. No mirrors.
No, the mirror was humanity looking back at itself and realizing that we're the monsters. It was a symbolic mirror. Okay, let's
See,
rate this.
that would be funny if we did that. What's more funny is actually for most of the episodes, there are physically a lot of just actual mirrors in them. That's like their ongoing production. Somebody in the production design department just had like bought stock in a mirror company and like, we just got to buy as many of these as we can because got to make the bills.
Okay, so Sweat, we gave it a 3 out of 10. Rating is out of 5. What are you thinking here, Mark?
I don't know. I was sort of torn on this episode. I think in terms of its view of humanity and kind of the way sort of, mass psychology goes, it was so smart, obviously so relevant to what's going on right now. And I think to, a really good, to use your term, mirror of actual, I don't know if it's human psychology or American psychology. I think there were definitely parts of this that were specific to sort of the particular American social system. So I liked all of that so much, but I also like the level. Like I thought it would have been more powerful if the people were not so dumb and seemed like better reflections of like. Look, I think certainly a lot of people are dumb and selfish and stuff, but these people were like another level up. Like they were, maybe one step smarter than saying, let's inject some bleach and see if that kills COVID.
But no one would be that stupid.
So I guess that's where I'm kind of torn about. I'm going to pass and let you go first and make a case, and then I'll see how I feel about it.
Okay. Did you only get a chance to watch this once, or did you watch it multiple times?
I only watched it once.
Okay. Cause I would think I would have been more there with you. And I watched it a couple more times, and my opinion of it went up and up every time I watched it. So I was landing at like a 4.5 on this one, because like it was now 60 years later, maybe that, oh, man's the real monster idea, because there's so stupidly many zombie movies and zombie things and tropes out there, which I think that is usually the one that does that message, that maybe it's a little bit tired and a little bit cliched now. But I don't think at that time it was. And I think it was such a neat, it was very claustrophobic. I thought Maple Street was a very cool setting, and it went from such an idyllic, like late Saturday evening setting to like this nightmare scenario because of man's own flaws. And I thought it was really neat. So I was landing at a 4.5 on this out of 5.
You mentioned kind of Maple Street. Did you have the sense this reminded me a little bit of Walking Distance, but not of the present? It was almost like at the start of the episode, it was like the past that the guy goes back to in Walking Distance, which I guess would have been like the 30s or something. It very much had that feel to it, that it even felt like this Maple Street area was like closed off and wasn't even in modern times, not 2020 modern times, or like modern times of when Twilight Zone was set. Like
it was like Disneyland.
The ice cream cart comes by and the kids run up and he just starts handing them ice cream. They don't like give him any money or order anything. Just like, yeah, have some ice cream, kids. It's 1960.
Yeah. It was almost like a Westworld version of 1960. It was very idyllic and which was appropriate and apt for this episode, because it was so how easily the veneer of these people's facades and these niceties to each other. And, I don't know if you live in a neighborhood, but I live in a neighborhood like that, where everyone's super nice to each other and we're all probably talking shit about each other behind our backs. Unless you're listening to this right now, I'm not talking shit about you behind your back.
Did you also notice there's it's right at the end of the opening voiceover, like, so we're still in idyllic time. It's kind of right before things get going. There's a girl just runs across, probably like teenaged, runs across the street, and there's a guy by his car and he like flips open the side of the hood so she can like look under the hood at the engine. And I was like, is that how I guess that was like 60s car culture. He's like showing off by showing her, like, can you imagine like right now, like you like see some girl like, hey, like, let me pop the hood on my Honda Civic here and take a look at that. But like, that's just like such a weird courtship thing.
Well, if you're driving a Honda Civic, I would recommend not using that no matter what time. Like, you probably should have a better car.
Are you bad mouthing my Honda Civic?
No, I'm just saying don't try and pick up girls by opening the hood of your Honda Civic. It depends on the car.
Well, what if I had like a Lamborghini? Am I
Yeah,
gonna
then I
like
think a
pop
girl
the
would want
hood
it.
and like look, like no, get in the car and we'll go for a ride or something. Like,
I
don't
think
know.
if you're driving a Lamborghini, a romantic interest would want to see what's under the hood, if you know what I mean.
But
Is that too subtle?
All right, so I'll get back. So you said 4.5.
I said 4.5. Do you want to hear some other 4.5s?
Yeah. Let me hear some other 4.5s and some 4s, because I think you made a good case for the sort of overall interest in it. And yes, probably that this was a theme that was not as played out as it is now. On the other hand, we've also seen episodes with better writing and acting in the Twilight Zone, so it's not like they were incapable of those things at that point. So I think I might be leaning towards a 3.5 or 4, but give me some in those ranges and see where it fits.
So 4.5's one for the angels, and When the Sky Was Opened, Third from the Sun, and The Last Flight. Some 4s.
I don't feel like this is up to those level. Let me hear what the 4s are.
Okay. 16 millimeter Shrine, Time Enough at Last, The Purple Testament. You want to hear some 3.5s?
Yeah, I'm thinking maybe a 4. Let me hear 3.5.
I think we only have one, The Lonely. So you have to not.
Oh, this was better than The Lonely for sure.
I know, I'm the champion of The Lonely. And then our only 5 still remains Judgment Night.
I guess I would say 4 is my rating.
Okay, I think that's fair, because I think the first time I watched it, I would have been about a 3.5. And then probably the second time I was probably at a 4. And then the third time was probably about a 4.5. So I'd be super happy with a 4.
So yeah, and I think I was probably at about a 3.5, and you talked me up to a 4 with your explanation.
Okay.
Like there was obviously a lot to talk about, and a lot of the themes really resonated with us. I just wanted more out of the execution.
Okay. Any last thoughts, or you want to guess next week?
I just want to say with the guesses, because I just listened to Mirror Image and heard my guess on this. And before I watched this, but after I listened to that episode, I was like, I have a different idea now on the title, which was that there were aliens landing and nobody saw them, and it was like Invasion of the Body Snatchers. They thought their neighbors were actually aliens and would start killing each other, which was kind of what it turned out to be, except the aliens were not actually taking over the people. And again, one of the things I thought was interesting about this episode is you knew the whole way it was going to play out. Like it was fair. It was obvious pretty early on that they were going to like go into mob mentality and turn on each other, but really, how it was going to all wrap up. Like, did it turn out one of them actually was an alien and maybe they killed the wrong one, and the alien got away? Was that really the whole thing was just an accidental power outage from a meteor and they just descended into chaos immediately anyway? As it turned out, it was alien. So I thought it was interesting that despite knowing how the core plot was going to turn out, you really still didn't know till the end, like what the final twist or denouement was going to be.
Agreed.
I think that's all I got to say.
Okay. Well, then why don't you guess what next week's episode is going to be? And the title is A World of Difference.
That sounds like it should be like an after school special, doesn't it?
Webster finds a friend at home and his father does not like him.
I'm going to say A World of Difference. All right. I'm going to say some sort of astronaut crash lands on a planet where everything seems a lot like Earth, but there's some crucial difference that he doesn't find out till it's too late.
Very good.
And you notice I said he, because after our discussion last week, I'm fairly confident all our protagonists are going to be male until we hear otherwise from Sterling again.
Very good. Thank you all for listening. This was Deja Reviewed. As Mark just hazarded a guess, next week's episode is episode 23 of season 1 of The Twilight Zone, titled A World of Difference. It's available on US Netflix. Feel free to leave us a rating and a comment wherever you're listening to us. And if you are enjoying the podcast, please subscribe. That helps us out. Leave us a rating, do all those things, talk us up, share us with some friends, do whatever you can. You can find us at DejaReview.com, and you can also there leave us a voicemail or a text message, and we would really love that. And we hope that you tune in next week.
Deja Review.